Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik, where we bring you news, politics, and culture without the red and blue treatment. I'm Michelle Whitty here with John Kiriakou, returning to domestic affairs here in our second hour, this time talking a little more about the economy and the Democrats. I wrote a really silly joke here. Two things that are basically in the toilet. There we go. A little chuckle. Just before we went to air, in fact, we saw that Chuck Schumer had delayed a vote on changing filibuster rules because, what do you know, his party does not have the vote to enact the votes to enact those changes, despite all of Joe Biden's big speech making. So we're going to talk about what exactly this party intends to do about any of the things facing the people of this country. And here to get into all of that with us is Steve Grumbine. He's the founder and CEO of the nonprofits Real Progressives and Real Progress in Action. He's the host of the podcast Macro and Cheese. He's an activist and an evangelist for modern monetary theory. Steve, thanks for joining us again.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me on.
There's a lot to get into. I want to start with inflation. We saw reports earlier this week, of course, that inflation is at 7%. And I wanted to just kind of ask you, do you think that's the real number, or do you think that's a sort of, a fudgy way of calculating it? And, the reality of the inflation people are feeling is a little bit higher. What do you make of these figures?
Well, I guess the big thing is that what makes up this inflation, right? I mean, inflation is not something that just naturally happens. I mean, it literally takes somebody to type into the pricing of their product a new cost. The companies raise their prices, and because history has shown us, at least the right-wing libertarian strain has shown us, that people believe that spending money by the government creates inflation. It's created the fertile ground for these corporations and monopolies in many cases to gouge and raise prices. So I think that this is kind of a combination of opportunists knowing that we had supply chain breakdowns. And so I expect this is pretty much a one-time kind of an event, and it will level out because it can't be sustained. And there's nothing driving the inflation per se in terms of any meaningful long-term cost issue. We're talking about mostly supply chains and monopoly opportunists. So the number that we're looking at is, in my opinion, it is a spike because they're trying to get what they can while we're dumb and stupid and unable to fight back. And they count on that and they use it to great precision. And that's what they're doing. So is it higher or lower? I think that it really doesn't much matter. I think that it's a temporary shock that will go away. So
you think someone with the Biden administration saying this is corporate greed, is actually correct, and this isn't, this something that the Fed has gotten us into by pumping that $1 trillion a month into stabilizing the markets that just went God knows where?
No, exactly. No, I don't like Biden. I don't provide a lot of support for Biden, but every once in a while, Biden accidentally gets something correct, and this would be one of those moments. So don't accuse me of being a Biden sycophant. You just happen to accidentally get it right.
We would. I want to ask about some other economic indicators as well, right? We have job growth being disappointing over the last couple of months. We have reports of hiring slowing. We have this headline in BNN Bloomberg this morning: U.S. retail sales slide sharply as inflation weighs on consumers. And so I want to put those together and ask what the rest of the picture of the economy looks like to you. But I also want to ask, I keep seeing these editorials blaming, in addition to this corporate greed, blaming generous government subsidies like stimulus checks for part of the reason our economy is running too hot. When I see these headlines about retail sales sliding, it makes me think the problem isn't that people have too much money to spend, Steve.
Well, you are unique in this space that you actually used the head and the brain on your body to come up with the most logical answer possible. And that is rare in this day and age, because you're right. They are playing once again on Milton Friedman logic from the 70s that has long since been debunked. This concept of if they spend money, it creates inflation. And this has literally been the neoliberal project from the 60s got evidenced in when Nixon removed us from the gold standard. These people were waiting in the wings, knew exactly what to do with that change. And that was in 72. And as you saw this creep up through the Carter administration, who, contrary to all his modern day help of the poor, was very much king neoliberal in the 70s. And then you saw Ronald Reagan just sprinkle, steroids on this and it go crazy. But the fact is that this is because we believe that. If you believe something, they're not going to say something different. This is their opportunity to exploit our ignorance. And they keep us ignorant so they can, in fact, do that. So in fairness, quantity theory of money is a bunch of BS. It's a distributional issue. If you think about it, if every single person in the planet had an extra $2,000 a month in their pocket, and they were able to take that extra $2,000 a month in their pocket and do things that they previously were unable to do, like get a tooth filled or go get surgery or maybe buy a new car or fix that big hole in their roof or whatever, all of a sudden there would be a run on handymen. There wouldn't be enough handymen to support all the work that was out there. Suddenly there would be lines waiting for dental appointments because there's just not enough dentists out there right now to handle the demand that would be there if everybody could get those painful cavities filled that currently can't do that. So it's a distribution issue. So when we spend money, where did we spend this money? That money didn't make it to Jane and Joe Public. It didn't make it down to Main Street. It stayed up in the fire sector where the rich were able to take that money, do stock buybacks. They were able to do all kinds of things that were allowing them to earn interest-bearing investments that had nothing to do with Main Street. And so you're right, retail sales are down because the people that could have spent the money into those areas never got that money. So it's never, in my opinion, it's not even an opinion. I shouldn't even say it that way. Empirically, it's not printing money. It's not the expansion of the money supply that randomly causes this God-breathed phenomenon called inflation. It's really about supply keeping up with demand in many ways, or the appearance of that and corruption and monopoly, monopoly powers and antitrust type things where people are literally gouging. And so I would not allow anyone to tell you that spending on the poor has suddenly caused inflation. If anything, if they spend on the poor and stuff like that, which they didn't, you would see us need to start hiring people and a whole host of other jobs to keep up with the demand. So you want to make the economy really work for all, spend it at the bottom where they have the power to distribute that money throughout the economy where they want to, and you're going to see a vastly different construct. And inflation could be a real thing then, because if we haven't kept up with training the people to fill the needs for the real resources those people could buy, you will have bottlenecks, you will have cost overruns, and you will have competition for scarce resources. So that is a real factor. And my take on that would be simply make sure you keep up with demand. Mm-hmm. Make sure that you have enough supply to keep up with demand, and always let the people make those decisions. And they haven't. And we've been sitting there with our tongue out, waiting for the drip to come from the rich, and it just doesn't come. It's just never coming.
So I can guess that, I sent you this article in the Wall Street Journal from today saying the Wall Street Journal's the position of these two authors is that Democrats and Republicans have reached the limits of what they as political parties can do to manage inflation. Saying that Democrats are focusing on supply chain issues and a spending package. Republicans want to increase energy production to solve the problem. The Wall Street Journal's position is that, this is entirely in the hands of the Fed. There's not something in the sort of political toolkit that you can do to address this problem. I think that you would disagree with that and say, this spending package that's being put together by the Democrats might be the most significant thing you can do to affect prices in the United States. What do you make of it?
Well, first things first, if you're talking about raising interest rates, which is really the only thing the Fed can do, they can raise interest rates. And that's their go-to measure from back when Volcker ran the Fed back in the 70s. And we know what does raising interest rates mean? It means the rich get more money. That's it. You're pumping more money into the fire sector that they just turn around and invest. So you're not doing anything. All you're doing is making credit more difficult for Jane and Joe Public to get. And you're going to end up creating a worse situation. You're going to create a recession or possibly a depression, and definitely stagflation at that point, right? So I think that one of the keys here is to realize the Fed has very limited powers. Like if you can imagine a small child back in the 70s in their car seat in the front seat as opposed to the back seat with a fake steering wheel and a binky in their mouth. That's what the Fed can do to solve the economy. They're in the passenger side with that fake steering wheel, pretending like they're doing something. The real power is fiscal policy, and that's over there underneath of Congress. And the real story here, quite frankly, is if you have Saudi Arabia gouging on the oil side, oil is one of the very few things that is in literally everything, from glass making to plastics to every manner of lubricant throughout. So you've got a situation where if they raise the prices on crude or they raise the price on refined products, you're going to have a natural increase in all prices. So there is a take there that maybe increasing energy production, producing access, making it more affordable, subsidizing, that could really bring down prices for sure. The other thing that Congress could do right now is they could literally put price caps on. They could do some price caps and literally manage the costs. They could do that. And I have absolutely no problem with rent control. I have no problem with price control, quite frankly. And I think when you see monopolistic behavior, anti-competitive behavior, where people are raising the prices because they can, I think that's a perfect opportunity for Congress to step in and say, you're not working in the best interest of the people. It's time to stop this crap, and then literally cap that cost. Will they do it? Absolutely not, because they are part of a political theater that runs interference for capital. And so capital wants to get what they can out of this. They have the, never let a good crisis go to waste, Rahm Emanuel. Well, they won't let a good crisis about inflation go to waste either. And they are going to go ahead and gouge. So Congress has a lot of tools at their disposal. They could, in effect, put any kind of Pigovian, meaning sin tax, on behaviors that are not helping with this price battle, if you will. They could do any number of things, and they just won't do it. They will give off the appearance that they've tried. They'll look like their arms are long, like they've been carrying a load. Thank you, Chris Cornell. Mm-hmm. They will literally be as obtuse about the cause and effect of this as possible. And so it really does come down to you and I getting this word out there. Others like Stephanie Kelton and the MMT community, of course, talking about this stuff and exposing the BS that the Wall Street Journal keeps putting out there, and the New York Times and others who just seriously have a fetish towards making sure we are living in a nonstop state of finance capital.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me, I apologize, Steve, for making you look at the most recent article by Paul Krugman, but we have to do it, right? That's the job.
Apology accepted.
Thank you. He is saying, it's called the secret triumph of economic policy, which is a pretty gutsy thing to drop in the middle of all of this economic news. But he's basically saying, yeah, okay, inflation is bad and it's hurting people who don't have a lot of money. But have you seen the employment figures? Right. And I wanted to start off by just asking, has gig work, has the way we calculate employment caught up with the proliferation of gig work or not? Because right now, are we looking at employment figures that are really so wildly skewed by missing people who are making a few dollars an hour, working a few hours a week at, for Instacart or whatever, that it looks like we have a much different unemployment picture than we have, or are they somehow accounting for gig work in these figures?
Just remember all these adjusted figures that they've gone through over the years. Back in the day, I think, Reagan was one of the ones that changed the way they actually address unemployment.
Yes. Reagan changed that in that he included members of the military in the employed, which at the time dropped the unemployment rate by 0.2%.
Yep. This is called fast and loose with the numbers, right? and I think that we're paying the price for it. But I think that any time you have something change, like just the impact of Bitcoin pulling money out of the economy, for example, right? Because it's really, you're pulling productive cash out of the economy and people are playing games. It's almost like Wall Street 2.0 in a different way. That money is pulled out of the actual productive economy and it's over there. Well, in this case, they haven't caught up with how work goes either. And so many people are trapped in Fiverr world where they're putting their wares out there and bidding for one job here, one job there. And, what a horrible deal, right? I mean, you talk about literally codifying precarity into our existence. And this right here is standard fare. And no, they have not caught up with it. First of all, I think a lot of people that are living in different circumstances as a result of COVID, piling up together, sharing homes, dropping out. A lot of people are taking those gig works, just getting enough money to come in the door to keep the gang going. And I think some people that works for them. But as an overarching economic policy, it's trash. And they don't know how to measure it. And they've got this false positive that, hey, look at all these jobs. Well, I got to tell you something. That's horse crap. It's not good. And we really need to be more like, Encyclopedia Brown or some sort of a sleuth digging under the surface and looking at this, because these people don't have health insurance.
Yeah.
They don't have education. They don't have days off, not paid days off anyway.
I mean, Steve, you don't even have, we talked earlier this week about a survey of Kroger's workers. Kroger's, I think, fourth largest private employer in the United States. And this survey of workers from 3 states found that 14% of them had been homeless. So you're not even talking about benefits. It's, are you making enough money to keep a roof over your head? And so, I wanted to highlight this Krugman article just because, the context here is really important, right? Slapping yourself on the back over achieving this level, this employment level, right? Getting unemployment down so low. When you look at what is actually called employment, not to mention when you look at, the numbers of working poor and how absolutely outrageously low our poverty threshold is just ridiculous. I mean, and why pay Jen Psaki when you have Paul Krugman in the pages of the New York Times to just be, presenting these figures without context and sort of abetting this really anachronistic understanding of these economic indicators?
Yeah, I think that's one thing, but I think something else too is troubling. And I don't think the average person's going to think about this, but I'm going to go ahead and throw it out there because that's just what I do. So if you look back at 08 and 09, when we had the worst financial crisis any of us have experienced in our lifetime. I don't think there's too many of us. God knows Betty White's not around, so we can't claim she was around for the Great Depression here. So we're at this point where the greatest single economic fiasco was the global financial crisis we experienced in 08 and 09. Well, they managed to cut this particular crisis, if you will, significantly from being like it was in 08 and 09, where people were driving 4 hours across state lines to go work a midnight shift at Walmart. Okay. That right there, that scenario did not happen this time, to be fair. So in terms of degrees, you could say, because Obama only put $900 billion out there, he didn't even get $1 trillion in stimulus for the global financial crisis.
Right.
Remember that.
Right.
He didn't even get $1 trillion. Well, Biden has been able to get many, many, many more trillions into the economy, which was what allowed us to not completely bottom out. Look, I don't like giving this man any credit at all. They weren't good programs. There was way better programs that could have been had. However, to be fair, it was able to put this thing into a much better place where we did not have that extreme situation that occurred in 08 and 09. I lived that one. I can tell you it's different this time for sure. But that doesn't make it good. This is the typical neoliberal thing. Hey, here's this food over here that's made completely of fecal matter, and here's this thing over here that's only half fecal matter. Which one are you going to eat? You're going to eat the one that's complete cow patties, or you're going to eat the one that's only partial cow patties? Chances are, if you only have those two things to choose from, you're going to choose the thing that only has partial cow pie in it, right? I mean, it's a horrible thing, but you'd rather have half of it. And I think Nina Turner even said this. Would you rather a full bowl or a half a bowl,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And in this case, I mean, I think this is kind of the half a bowl here. And so naturally, for people like Krugman who have never done anything right in their lives, it's an opportunity to kind of peacock around and say, see, look at this, it's better than it was before.
Yeah.
And that's it. It's no better than, it's horrible, but it's better than it did the last time.
Mm-hmm. It seems like, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this, it does seem like in trumpeting the achievements of this administration that Krugman is actually in a smaller and smaller crowd, right? I don't know if you saw the clip of Kamala Harris making the rounds from her NBC interview, and she sort of lapsed into word salad talking about the administration's COVID response. But that entire interview, I mean, it's not as though she was facing a hostile interviewer, but she wasn't getting the kind of tongue bath that we have gotten used to for Democratic leaders, particularly after a year of Cuomo on CNN. And again, when NPR this morning was reporting on the Supreme Court blocking Biden's vaccine mandate, the person that they talked to discuss it was a business owner who basically said, I don't care, I'm kind of relieved. It's not the kind of thing I want to have to worry about right now. So there is a not a hostility, but you do have the press, kind of going, we don't know what's happening with this administration either, and not covering for them, I think, quite as much as they did when Biden first came into office and, was the next FDR and was having child poverty and the like. I wanted to ask if this is something you've observed, a sort of, the bloom being off the rose when it comes to Biden and the media.
I don't think it's the bloom and Biden in the media. I think what's happened is this. Obviously the pandemic was unique and it allowed us to explore things in a different way. We got to see the economy stay afloat even without businesses remaining open. We got to see people eating and keeping their homes even though they weren't physically working. We got to realize this economy is built on a fraud. This idea that we have to kill ourselves for the man to survive, otherwise the world will fall apart. We realize now that that's not necessarily true, okay? So with that in mind, they're trying to rediscipline labor, rediscipline society to getting back to it, if you will, okay? And Biden's programs and stuff were written during the pandemic. They were written with an understanding of what the pandemic was. Now, mind you, he's got a lot of neoliberals in there pushing his hand. I'm not here to defend the man, but he did have people that had a brain, that did have some clues in there dropping seeds of truth throughout this. People like Robert Hockett, people like Stephanie Kelton, people like Sarah Nelson, people like Derek Hamilton, other folks out there that really do understand how this stuff works. And so accidentally, I don't know, purposely maybe even, I don't know, maybe after all these years of destroying the world, Biden had a moment of, hey, maybe my legacy shouldn't be that of being an austerity guy. I don't know. But at some point in time, Biden decided that, hey, maybe it was better to go big and try for big, even though he didn't get big. His Build Back Better was slammed shut by his own party. Okay. I think that the media being owned by those 5 or 6 oligarchs out there is in the business of redisciplining society. And if Biden's going to get back into the straight and narrow, and I think this is how that they do that. This is their guiding hand to bring it back to where labor doesn't have a voice anymore. And I think that's really kind of what you're seeing.
I mean, I would put it as having the party, right? The Democrats, along with, again, the media owned by the 5 big powers that be, disciplining the president, which is an interesting presentation. Yeah, maybe I buy it.
I think when we talk about disciplining the president, I think there's probably 99% of the meetings that take place, you have no idea what took place. It's the 1% when they show up for a press release or something that you get to see.
That's
so they've already talked this out. They already know where this is going. They already know that Biden has to look like he's getting punched down so he can be a sympathetic figure when he says, hey, I had to change, or I had to go back, or I had to do this, or I had to do that. And I think that this, and I hate to sound that cynical, but I really believe that this political theater is worked out behind the scenes and then presented to us like, community theater in front of a large national audience. And I think that this is part and parcel with that. They've got to make Biden look like he's done everything he could, and now we got to rein Biden back in. I think that that's all part of him saying, see, guys, I tried. I think that that is really what that's about. I could be wrong. I have no empirical proof of that whatsoever other than common sense.
Do you think that the Democratic base would tolerate that with his poll numbers as low as they are now? Can he afford to allow them to go a little bit lower before they go up with midterms coming up?
You know what? I think that these numbers are there for the donors. I think that these are the numbers that allow them to say, oh, my God, we've got a crisis. We need all your money. Please send money right now. And I think that you have to realize that the people at the top, the real people at the top that don't get elected, that are making money hand over fist, no matter what administration is there, want the same thing. That's why fundamentally nothing will change Joe got in there. Okay, because nothing will fundamentally change. And I think that once things start fundamentally changing, they have to bring it back. So the party is one layer below the apparatus that tells you how it's going to be. And I think that, the donor class, the capitalists, the people that really are the plutocrats that run, so much of what we're in the middle of, have spoken. And this is what you're getting. I don't think that it really matters about the Democrats in the oligarchs' minds. I think they've let them know point blank, you will do this. And if it hurts you too bad, we'll get to you next round. I believe that.
Mm-hmm. That wouldn't seem to imply that there's a lot of hope that Democrats are going to be able to get paid leave and maybe more COVID relief in this next spending package that they are already hammering out. These are the reports from today. The current package funding the government expires, I think, February 18th, and they're trying to avoid, if we're to believe these stories, they're trying to avoid another showdown and possible government shutdown over, how to distribute this funding. And so, maybe giving up on BBB, they're trying to slide these different, again, popular things into a new spending package. But it doesn't seem, again, like the party itself as a unit is able to get anything done. So I wonder if you have any hopes for pulling some of these items out of Biden's larger social investment spending plan and kind of plugging them one at a time into different funding bills that come along.
Anything's possible, but no, I don't believe so. I really do believe that if you remember when the Tea Party swept through, there was all these grants out there. There was the electrical broadband and electrification product that the Obama had put out there for reviving broadband in rural areas. They had done all these programs, shovel ready, all that good stuff, right? And when the Tea Party swept through, what happened? They literally shut down every one of them. And I think that you see a similar thing happening here now, where the Democrats had a supermajority, albeit very tenuous, and they're in the process of losing that. And I think that they know that, and I think that everyone kind of knows that. And so they're playing with a very weak hand right now. They didn't play hardball. They didn't do the things they needed to do when they really had some wind at their back. They squandered. How you can squander this is beyond me, but they squandered replacing Trump, with Biden by being feckless, largely feckless, and not being able to control his own party and be able to get votes that he should have been able to get without any kind of problem. And I think that you're seeing the fruits of that labor right here, right now. I really don't see a lot of hope. I'll be honest with you. I don't want to be Debbie Downer here. I just would rather be real and have my integrity after I say it than sell you a pie in the sky thing that genuinely doesn't really have any real meaningful way of happening.
You have to wonder, as I agree, but then you have to wonder, talking about cynicism, how many more times they are going to send Joe Biden out like they did in Atlanta just this past week to very publicly attempt to rally support for something that everybody watching knows does not have that support. Does that end with 2022? Does he keep doing it all the way to the end of his term? What do you think, Steve?
Think about what Bernie Sanders used to do. Even when he was in the minority, Bernie Sanders would go around with his same spiel he had been telling us for the last 50 years. And it never changed. It was always the right story, even though nothing was ever really done about it. But you saw that popular opinion would climb based on Bernie's road trips, based on repeating these things. You saw it continue to grow and grow and grow. It's possible, since this is supposedly Bernie's buddy, it's quite possible that Joe is trying to take a page out of Bernie Sanders' playbook to do exactly what you just said in hopes. But he's no Bernie Sanders. There's nothing inspirational about Joe Biden.
Hard to do it late in the game. I think you have to have a sort of consistency of record and an integrity of a Sanders to make that happen. And
yes.
Yeah. A little late in the game for that when you're talking about Joe Biden. Steve Grumbine, always great to talk to you. Why don't you tell our listeners where they can find Macro and Cheese, where they can find the new Untouchables, where they can find Real Progressives and Real Progress in Action?
Sure.
Tell them where.
You can find us at realprogressives.org. And you can find my new show, which is Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at noon on Real Progress in Action YouTube channel. It's called The Rogue Scholar. And of course, Macro and Cheese is our podcast, which we release every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can find that on any podcasting hosting site, or you can come to our website under the media dropdown for Macro and Cheese.
Mm-hmm. Thanks so much, Steve. Congratulations on the new show. I'll have to check it out.
Yep. Thank you so much. We'll have you on soon. Talk to y'all both later. Thank you, John. It's good to talk with you.
Thank you.
Thanks. You're
Good to
listening
talk to you.
to Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik. We're live in D.C., and we'll be right back.